We are live. Let's go.
Great, thank you. Hello, welcome everyone to roll call number 12. That's issue 1461 in the Ethereum/PM repo. Link in the chat. Yeah, so first topic of the day is something we touched on a little bit last time, but just to re-raise because this has come up again on multiple ACDs, and that's the idea of having a limit on the number of blobs that a single transaction can carry. Of the day is something we
helps
touched on
us
a little bit
ensure
last time, but
have some more sensible boundaries on the mempool and just generally how things propagate, and so it makes it a little bit easier to reason about. And so this is very helpful for the L1 core devs. Last time there weren't any objections raised for this, but as this is now likely to become something that ships on the L1, I think it's worth just re-raising. Does anyone have any objections to seeing something like this happen?
No objections. I am curious what the limit will be, because Arbitrum, we currently limit ourselves to 3 blobs per transaction.
To become something that ships on. So I think the exact limit is still. Does anyone have any objections? Like under discussion. Seeing some. There was some people arguing for 7. I think it would be nice if it's a number that's easier to pack into the block into the target and max. But yeah, I don't foresee 3 being an issue for now.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we do that because max number of blobs minus the target number of blobs is 3, and so that way you were not jacking up the price.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think basically like right now probably 7 is just in discussion because I think that's together with the transaction object itself, that's like a 1 megabyte below 1 megabyte kind of object, so that's nice for the mempool. Otherwise, 8 is just like kind of a nice round number. 9 it would be the current maximum in after Pectra. So those are, I think, reasonable candidates. I think the overall idea would be to just set the limit for now anyway, just so we have a limit to reason about as we go to hopefully much larger total numbers in Fusaka. And then adjust later on. So basically, if we start with a, say, I don't know, 7 or something, and then it turns out that that's actually quite constraining for several L2s, then we would just in the hard fork afterwards in Amsterdam next year, we would then just raise that ceiling. These are not like permanent locked in decisions, just something to get going.
Yep. Okay, great. Next topic of discussion is I'm going to talk to some of the things happening with respect to the EVM on the O1 and some of the research calls that have been happening as well.
Yeah, so I just wanted to let me maybe share my screen, share entire screen, share. Can you see my screen? This is a very empty slide. I just wanted to basically briefly just make sure that in terms of ACD recap, it's mentioned. So obviously, since the last roll call, the Pectra fork on Ethereum L1 has shipped. The main one aspect in which this does affect L2s, or at least indirectly, is that the L1 EVM now has support for ERP 7702, which is basically allows delegation for UAs. So UAs basically can act as smart accounts. That has seen quite meaningful uptake already, with most major UA wallets like MetaMask already having support for this, which means that over time users will start expecting support for this, and then of course it would be nice if they also have support for this on the L2 side. So just saying that I think as this is now live on L1, this should probably at least be like as an L2 you should have a strategy around this, and if the strategy for some reason is that you specifically do not want to support this, that's also fine. But like I think just heads up, you should make sure you have a strategy for this in place. Not sure if there's anything anyone would want to talk about on this topic specifically. Yeah. Otherwise, always feel free. It happens to be that like I'm one of the co-authors of the AP. I also think we have Matt on the call, who is another one of the co-authors and the main champion of the AP. So yeah, I think if you have questions or something, I think we'd be happy to answer them. And then just another quick slide before I go into the research side. Like Fusaka, Carl already mentioned the request for feedback. Other thing, just to briefly mention for Fusaka coming up, scope-wise, obviously there was this big change. The EUF was removed from the scope, so it's for now unclear if and when EUF will come to Ethereum mainnet, which does mean that, like, again, if you have a strategy around EUF for your own L2, please be advised that changed on L1, so take that into account. PRS will continue to be in Fusaka. It's the main feature for Fusaka, so the blob throughput will increase. The exact numbers are still TBD and depend on how quickly we can get to stability at different throughput levels there. It will be a significant change over the 9 maximum and 6 target that we have today. But the exact numbers are to be determined. And then there will be some small EVM changes where, again, kind of if you're EVM equivalent, just heads up there, some repricing around ModX, and then also at least proposed there are some small individual changes now to basically replace the bigger changes of UF with some more targeted smaller changes. Yeah, so just that. And then the main thing I wanted to briefly talk about, or to talk about, is we had the protocol research call number 2, and these are basically like calls where we just talk about the future of the Ethereum L1 network. Just last week on Wednesday, and there was a topic that I think I wanted to briefly summarize, and because I think that's kind of relevant for the topic of EVM equivalence in general. And that was, so basically, like, the call last week was specifically on the kind of this quadrant of the Ethereum roadmap that's like the short-term execution layer focused changes. So basically, like, where we're now for the first time in basically 5 years again trying to increase throughput, which we just have not done since before the merge, basically. And on this topic, one aspect is specifically, as we get going, I think it's good to talk a little about how we are approaching that topic, because that has implications on future EVM changes, but also just like general changes and how they might be relevant for the L2s as well. And specifically, like, I gave this brief talk about scaling loops. I'll give a shortened version of this now, or just like talk about the L2 relevant aspects there. So I think the way, at least I think about this from the L1 side, is that we are starting to build this loop in terms of identifying the individual bottlenecks that keep us from scaling throughput, and then having 3 different ways of addressing them. And so basically 3 different feedback loops. The first one is improve, meaning just like on the engineering side, on the client side, basically like remove the bottlenecks by just things like changing the database or things like that, right? So basically where you actually, it's an engineering way of addressing the bottleneck. The second one is contain, and basically just like make it so that bottleneck does not hold back the scaling of the overall chain. And the third one is actual protocol changes. So in terms of identify like the individual bottlenecks that they are, like, I think we are getting more sophisticated on this. On the L1 side now, there's different dimensions, right? Like different types of bottlenecks that you have. This is more an example. This is by no means comprehensive or even the right necessarily structuring or something, but this is just supposed to give you like a bit of an impression of like how we think about how we approach identifying scaling bottlenecks. And of course, by the way, I'm talking about this now. Most of you from the L2 side will have already much more sophisticated thoughts on this. Like for you all, this might even look a bit naive because you've been having to face the challenge of scaling for a long time now. So as we are ramping up, I still think it's good to like sync on how we think about these things. So that's kind of how we approach the kind of the individual, like just like thinking about types of bottlenecks that they are, and then in terms of what basically as we understand which of them are holding us back from getting to higher throughput. So for example, right now on the Ethereum L1, there's just like concerns around the worst case size of blocks, and there's some kind of constants where basically just if that size becomes larger than 10 megabytes, the P2P has some issues dealing with this. So that's just like a short-term bottleneck. And then how do we address these bottlenecks from the L1 point of view? As I said, improve, contain, change. The interesting thing is that naturally, the only of the three tools that is available for L2s as they want to scale or have been scaling in the past is the improve side. And because improve really just means, not just, it's actually quite the challenge, of course, but like means engineering improvements. And that does not specifically, if you can remain EVM equivalent even as you change the, make changes on the engineering side, of course. The second one, contain. Contain is interesting because contain means like sometimes when you identify a worst case bottleneck. So for example, ZK EVMs face that often, right? So basically, like you have a bottleneck with like say catcheck or something, right? Now you could change it by actually making a change, like the last point, a change to the protocol rules, but then you're no longer EVM equivalent, and that is often a tricky thing to kind of like get right. So often what you want to do is you just want to accept that bottleneck, but just contain it so it doesn't help, it doesn't block you from overall having a higher throughput level. The L2s have one tool that we, like US L2s have one tool that we don't have, which is the sequencer. So often what happens is just that the sequencer just has a limit on how many transactions of a certain type get included into a block, and that's something that, because we have fully permissionless sequencing or fully permissionless block building on the L1 side, we can't do on the L1 side. So that's one tool you have that we don't have. So basically, how we think about contain is through in protocol changes, which of course is harder for you to do as you stay EVM equivalent. But the nice thing is, as we basically now have to double down on this and become much more proficient in regularly doing these things, I think we'll build up a lot of like more generalized tooling around this, which then hopefully can also be used specifically on the L2 side for addressing L2 specific bottlenecks. So basically, the three types of containment that at least I saw in preparing this talk was just like you can cap a certain type of activity, so you just only allow this amount of catchchecks per block or something, or you only allow 10 megabyte block size or something like this. Just basically put a cap on and just consider everything invalid that goes above that block. You still need to, importantly, like in order to contain any dimension, you have to actually do metering in protocol. You can't have a rule that makes a block invalid over 10 megabytes if you don't have the size as a parameter to be like a available parameter in the first place. So you do have to basically always add metering in protocol for any type of bottleneck that you want to cap to contain. And then capping basically is a very simple thing to do. It does not affect the average case throughput, but it does have this this problem that it's not robust at high consumption, meaning that like if the cap actually starts to eat into what the natural demand level would be, it like has these problematic side effects. Reprice, you can just make the thing more expensive. Again, simple to do, reduces the throughput, of course, but is a robust thing to do. This is another thing where, like, right now we have been hearing from L2s sometimes that basically they would ideally want to have a different pricing level for several things. So, like, again, think of making catcheck more expensive, for example, or just make several compute operations that are just really expensive, for example, to prove for ZK EVMs more expensive. Right now, that's just very hard to do. As part of probably like us needing to do this as well on the L1, you can expect that in the future we will probably make pricing levels more of a dynamic parameter that you can just like change with a configuration file or something, which would make it much easier to have different pricing schedules on L2s versus the L1. And then the last one would be like some more heavy-handed, multi-dimensional kind of pricing new dimension, which we did once on the L1 for blob prices, of course. And we know that there's interest on the L2 to potentially do this as well. We had one breakout session on RollCall. That's, of course, conceptually the cleanest solution, but it is complex. So, but as we kind of ramp up tooling around this as well on the L1, hopefully that also helps us for kind of delivering these L2 specific desiderata there. So that's kind of the contain, and then the last thing, just briefly, the last part of the loop, the change. I don't think I had another slide on this, right? Yeah, that was the last slide. So basically, just changes as well, where like that's just often when we talk to tools again with EVM equivalents, there's just sometimes things like new features that would help with throughput that just you can't add because that would break compatibility with the L1. But now, as we also like change the L1 to be more basically to allow for these features that improve the bottlenecks, that should hopefully also give you benefits on the L2 because you get that for free. So yeah, I think basically just like I think it's just like as a general topic, something where you should be aware that that's now something that's changing about how the EL1 relates to the EL2s, because that was just like that entire kind of topic of the execution layer was something that was just more or less ossified rigid on the L1, and basically so you were on your own. And now as the L1 itself also scales, I think you should like have some sort of strategy understanding of to what extent that's maybe something you'd want to collaborate with, or just take as an input, but be aware that that's now something that's mutable under the hood, basically, and do your own scaling on top. But basically, just something that's a significant change to how the L1 operates that you should be aware of. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to. I hope that was somewhat useful, and like happy to also like of course talk a little about if there's feedback or something on this point. But yeah, that would be it from me. Yeah, if wait, I don't have a list of people raising their hands. Tiny?
Hi. Yeah. First of all, would be we Off-Chain Labs are also looking into how we can make pricing a more dynamic thing, and what it should look like. And we are working in some, I think, interesting directions, and would be really interested to collaborate to know where the L1 is going, and how we can use those mechanisms. I think it's a very positive direction. More generally, I've been following some conversations in the L1, and one thing that worries me in their look, in the L1 look at scaling, is that it seems like L1 only cares about scaling prover nodes. Like, we'll solve staking with some sort of proposer builder separation. And now after that, what we want to do is make sure that the builder can be scaled, and that's like the limit that we really care about. And it seems like, from my experience, is that the actual nodes that are important are nodes that don't try to prove the network, that don't try to stake on the network, that what they do is execute the network. And they execute the entire network. They do it just to keep up. They do it to answer RPCs. They do it to trace. They do ETH calls. Like, for every, even us, Off-Chain Labs, ourselves, we run one node that really needs to be able to, let's say we have 3 prover nodes that we run to debug in multiple ways, and many more than that executor nodes, right? RPC nodes. And Infura has RPC nodes. And like, most of the nodes on the chain, and most of the question of what scaling is and what are the requirements, is for executing nodes, is for nodes that will do RPC calls and ETH calls and things like that. And that's the thing that worries me when I look at where the L1 is going. I'd be happy to hear more from other L2s here and from other people in the direction, because like I feel that either I'm missing something very basic or someone else is.
Yeah, this is great, like a great comment. And by the way, this makes me think that maybe what we should do is at some point, maybe next month or something, have a like a roll call breakout where we just try to like bring the people from the L1 side that think about scaling now, and the people from the L2 side that have been thinking about this for quite a while together, right? And like discuss these things. I think that would probably be productive. Obviously, I am now involved with the scaling effort from the L1, but like there are many more people, and so I can only talk about some aspects of this. And I think it would be, and similarly, assume like many people from the L2 side that think about this are not on the call here right now. So I think that would probably be a very productive thing to do. In terms of what you specifically talked about, I think this is right. We actually, like, it's interesting. We had on the research call, we had Micah to towards the end, kind of like have a bit of a discussion session, lead a discussion session where he was pointing out that RPC nodes are like a very, very important consumer of the chain that needs to be more front and center in our kind of considerations around minimum requirements and the load and basically how we basically do scaling. I think from the L1 side, at least, how we think about this is that we have this hardware minimum requirements envelope that we recently formalized. There's now a meta EIP, I forget the number, but you can find it if you search for this, where we basically lay out an Ethereum node needs to have at least this hardware, this hardware, like RAM, CPU, disk, and whatnot. And the intention here would be to, like, for now at least, scale while staying in that envelope. So we already, like, by formalizing this a couple months ago, we already like put it at a level that's maybe somewhat higher than it used to be, informally understood to be. So we already gave ourselves a little bit more breathing room. But other than that, we expect to basically, like, we are focused on just like getting more of a headroom here for increased throughput, not by just making it harder to run a node. And yes, that the exception there is like block building, so we might be more okay with leaning into features that make block building more complex, but then that would have the nice effect that, like, a normal following nodes, whether that is a node for staking or just for RPCs, for ETH, like for basically and tracing for any kind of like more just executing and consuming the chain, the idea would be that those requirements should not change whatsoever. Now, of course, that, for example, right now that that hardware like envelope says that you need to like have at least, I think, 4 terabytes of NVMe SSDs, and so whereas we mostly, like, the state size right now is a fraction of that, and then there's history, and we're trying to like ship history expiry where the history goes away, but that means that like state might grow quite a bit, and so that will impact performance of RPC nodes and whatnot. So this is something we are actively monitoring, but in principle we're trying to like basically stay within the same pre-communicated hardware envelope for now, and if that ever were to change, we would like be careful about changing that. I'm not sure that does that answer that question or like answer that comment at all, or like
it does, but like, yeah, the thing that I think I'm worried to keep in mind is because like a large part is saying that staker nodes will not need, especially I think when looking at the further down the line plans, right, for ZK proven Ethereum. In ZK proven Ethereum, staker nodes will not have to execute blocks at all, just for staking, and that's good and fine. I think that even then, nodes that do have to execute the blockchain are very important.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I agree, and actually, I think the meta ERP, this kind of this like hardware requirements ERP, actually has a different category for stakers and just full nodes. And the idea is that like the requirements for full nodes should always be at or above or at or below the ones for stakers, right? And so now, of course, in principle, you can also have a full node that just consumes a ZK EVM proof, and so it doesn't execute. But then for some use cases, you do need to execute, as you said, right? So like I think this level of resolution of just distinguishing between full nodes and staking nodes, that's fine for now, but for the future we have to become more sophisticated in stateless nodes, stateful nodes, nodes that have to execute, the nodes that don't have to execute. Then there's also not having to execute but wanting to have the state diff. For some type use cases that's enough, right? So if you only need, say, the logs and the state diffs, but you don't actually need to execute, or you only need to execute individual transactions or something. For some use cases, that's enough. For some, it's not. So I think I don't really have much. Like, this is not something where we have results yet, or like we don't have a strategy for this yet. It's other than just acknowledging that we are aware that we need a strategy there. We can't just like scale and just accept that execution now no longer is possible on any reasonable hardware. That's not how we would approach this. But yeah, it is a generally hard, getting more sophisticated there. is something we're still in the process of figuring out how to think about this, I guess, is the point. And again, I think we have a lot there to learn from L2s, as you all have already like dealt with higher throughput levels and with all of these questions. And so I think my point here is, I think by default, a lot of the L1 people are more like focused on the L1, and the L2 people are focused on the L2. And I think this is really a topic where we would really benefit a lot from bridging this between the L1 and the L2.
Absolutely. I'm really trying to keep up with what's happening in the L1, but I think that a dedicated forum or something would be, anything that like arranges communication around that topic will be very, very good.
Yeah, no, that's really good feedback, and I think they're just what I would say is just like give us a little bit more time to like actually have a strategy from the L1 point. So, and then I think then like right now it's still very much in the exploratory phase. Talking there already, of course, makes sense, but I think a little bit later this year, I think will be the moment in time when it really makes sense to formally kick off some collaboration effort on this. Yeah. But yeah, good point. Any other?
Just touching quickly on the RPC requirements. I mean, right now it's kind of rate limited or constrained by full node requirements. And so we don't really need a separate specification for now. And I think we definitely would have and would need if we switched over to the VK side of things. We're also looking at like standardizing what we expect Grover hardware to look like as like another dimension that's useful to be able to talk about and reason about. So yeah, there's lots of hardware standardization across the entire stack that needs to happen.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Anyone else that had any thoughts that come to mind on this topic or anything? I think we already. I think it's clear that this is not a one-time topic to bring up once. I think this will become something to focus on in the future. But yeah, then that's all for me for now, just because I think I just wanted to get the conversation started a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Oscar. That brings us on to general discussion. Does anyone have any topics they would like to raise or discuss? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Then yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And yeah, we'll chat async. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, bye everyone.
Thank you.